Hi guys, today we're going to take a look at the tank role. Before I get started, full disclosure, the tank role is probably the role I've played the less. Essentially, when I started playing this universe online, when I was playing on PC, I was playing Ice Tank. I played my Ice Tank until about tier 4, and then I switched my ice tank to healer because we already had a fire tank in the group, and we didn't have a healer, so we desperately needed a healer in the group. So I switched to electric healer, and I haven't really played a tank since then. So it's been quite a bit since last I played a tank. I have played a tank a bit, but never really in endgame. So take whatever I say about the tank with a grain of salt. I do have some knowledge about the tank role, but nowhere near like someone like Death Mike or Trexlite. Essentially, my main expertise, if you will, would be the controller, and I have played healer also in endgame. The tank role is pretty much the one role I never played in endgame, so just fair warning. So what is the tank supposed to do? The tank is supposed to be the first one who jump into battle, and he's supposed to try to attract the enemies towards him and keep them focused on him so that the enemies don't jump on the rest of the group and kill them. The tank is the one who has the most survivability, so he should be able to attract all the enemies on him and then survive that onslaught of enemies while the rest of the group do their job. So he's supposed to be able to take a lot of damage and still survive through all that damage. Obviously, you will need the healer to help him stay alive, but overall, the tank by himself, to begin with, should have plenty of survivability, so he should be able to survive by himself for a bit. Essentially, there are times when the healer is not going to be able to heal the tank. When that happens, the tank has to be able to stay alive until the healer can heal him some more. There are various ways that the tanks will survive depending on their powers. For example, the ice tank will have various personal shields and various ways to resist damage, as opposed to a fire tank who will be able to heal himself quite a lot, so he will be able to heal himself as quickly as he gets damaged. And there's like the earth tank who will be able to transfer some of his damage to his pet in order to stay alive. So the various tank will have various mechanics and various tools to try to keep themselves alive. I will not go through that in this video. I'll probably make a video about each separate tank powers at some point, because each power would probably require its own video to be able to explain the mechanic of the tank properly. So since the tank is the one who's supposed to be able to survive the most, he should be the first one to jump into battle, and then he should attract all the enemies towards him. There are a few ways that the tank can attract the attention of enemies. The first one is by casting any powers. When in tank role, every time the tank casts a power, the power works as a taunt. So every time the tank will cast a power, it will taunt all the enemies around him, and in theory the enemies should attack him. There are a few instances where that will happen. I'll talk about that a bit later. Whenever the tank casts a power and it works as a taunt, the taunt should last about 12 seconds. Again, there are exceptions to that, but generally speaking, the taunt should last about 12 seconds. So once the tank casts the powers, normally the enemies should stay focused on him for about 12 seconds. So the tank will need to cast a power at least every 12 seconds. But ideally, he can refresh his taunt after 8 seconds. So anywhere between 8 and 12 seconds, if the tank casts a power, it will refresh the taunt and the enemies will stay focused on him. There's an exception to that. There is something that is known as scripted attack, where essentially an enemy can decide to ignore the tank and attack another enemy. That happens. But also the tank will have something that is known as pulls. There's a single target pulls, and there's also pulls that will pull a whole bunch of enemies. Ideally, the tank should have at least one pull move in case he needs to pull a very specific enemy. So if all the powers of the tank can work as a taunt, why does the tank need a pull move, you ask? It's pretty simple. Let's assume you have two tanks. You have an ice tank and you have a fire tank. And those two tanks are facing two evil enemies. They're facing, let's say, Captain Cold, and they're facing Heatwave. So let's assume that the two tanks talk to each other and they decide, okay, you take heat wave. Let's say the ice tank tells the fire tank, you take heat wave, and I'll take Captain Cold. But then for some reason, both Captain Cold and heat wave decide to jump on the ice tank. Well, then the fire tank could use a single target pull to pull heat wave away from the ice tank and onto himself. So even though every time the tank casts the powers, it works as a taunt, there are times when you want to taunt a very specific enemy, so having a few pull moves could work towards that. The main stats of the tank is dominance, and we have to clear something out before we continue. Dominance has nothing to do with aggro. There are a lot of players who seems to think that the more dominance you have, the more you'll aggro the enemy, the more you'll attract the enemy. It is not true at all. Dominance has nothing to do with aggro. So whether you have 1 dominance or 50,000 dominance, it will not change or affect how you can attract enemies towards you as a tank or as a player, period. Essentially, dominance works for all the crowd control, the pull moves, if you want to juggle an enemy, and all that good stuff. But again, it has nothing to do with aggro. And you'll see in various missions, especially well in alerts and in raids, you will see there is a suggested dominance. So essentially, in order to be able to crowd control enemies, you need to meet the suggested dominance of the mission. So although the dominance is the main stats of the tank, depending on the kind of tank you are, other stats may be important. For example, if you're a healing tank like the fire tank, then restoration will also be important. Restoration essentially increases the strength of your heal. So if you're a tank that needs to heal himself a lot like the fire tank, restoration will be good for you. Also, one of the job of the tank is to give resistance to the rest of the group. In certain abilities, you will see that the tank can give resistance to like himself and 7 other players. So that's also one of the function of the tank. So ideally, you will want the tank to give some resistance to the group so that they can resist being crowd control or being trapped or things like that. So in short, the tank needs to be the first one to jump into the battle. He's the one who has the most survivability. His main stats is dominance, which has nothing to do with aggro. And he's the one who's going to give resistance to the rest of the group so that they can resist things like crowd control and all that good stuff. So I hope this made some sort of sense. So that's pretty much it for now, guys. So thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.